Presenting Pink Floyd's Animals 2018 remix. The classic album remixed for the first time. Available now on vinyl LP, CD, and digital. Special limited deluxe edition coming on October 7th.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Week 5 of the PFF Pro Football Focus Show here on RotoGrinders. I am Britt Devine, here with my good friends Tyler Beaker and Scott Barrett. So, Scott, you walked into the room, and I saw this 1980s Pro Football Focus swag you have on here. How do I get my hands in this lovely sweatshirt you're currently?
Yeah, this is a special limited edition. I got this a few years ago. I don't think they make these anymore. So
I hope not.
Retro indeed. One of my favorite sweatshirts, so I will listen to no hating on it.
Tyler, this was before your time when these sweet sweatshirts got handed out, correct?
Yeah, before me, unfortunately. I missed out on the goods.
Oh, man. How's everybody's week 4? I had myself a good week 4, swept cash on all the sites, had some good tournaments as well. I'm looking to keep it rolling. Tyler, how'd you do?
Yeah, swept cash, like you said. On tournaments, I got a lot of very contrarian options in my tournament lineups, and the chalk hit. And when the chalk hits and you try to go too cute, You get burnt. So I got burnt in tournaments, but luckily I was able to survive via cash.
Literally the highest owned players, they all went off, every single one of them. You couldn't miss. I do the article where we kind of look at average ownership and stuff like that here on RotoGrinders. And I think we hit a peak for the season, I'm going to guess, last week in terms of the chalk hitting. Scott, how was week 4 for Scott?
I actually wrote the worst article I've ever written in my entire life. And, people reached out to PFF and told them to fire me. I've written 450 articles in my career, and honestly, nothing was ever as bad as this. I said to fade Mitch Trubisky, George Kittle, and Golden Tate. I still think Trubisky is a fish call. The data backed up the Tate fade as well as the Kittle fade, and it just really, really, really rough results based outcome for me. Was not good. And the worst part is I sat looking at these guys for a while. And I was like, no, I'm not going to play them. But I think I have good analysis on why to fade them. So I'll write that up, even though they are more borderline calls. But no,
and they're even 1 or 2% on guys to get burned on all of them down in a row when all the chalk goes off. So not a good article week for Scott, but we'll look to bounce back for week 5. We got a lot of fun stuff going on here in Pro Football Focus. We're going to have Scott's actual opportunity. We're going to go a couple. Their green line is really – there's a 8-point difference their green line has, and one of the over-unders is going to be for the Thursday game. So we'll talk about that. But let's get into it here. Let's start talking some of the plays of the week. And we'll start off at quarterback. We're going to give you a stud, a value play, and some duds at each position that their guys aren't really too interested in using some of the data at PFF. So, Tyler, let's start with you off the bat here. We've got a shootout of all shootouts pegged to happen in Pittsburgh this week. The overs have been hitting. If you've just been blindly picking the overs, you have won pretty big so far this year. Vegas is starting to adjust. This game is a 57 over-under, but you're rolling out both Scott, both you guys, taking the quarterbacks from this game. No surprise. Let's start off with Matt Ryan.
Yeah, if there's one thing I've learned so far this season, it's been that if you want to win a tournament, you're going to need every single in your lineup to outperform.
Not even just I had a conversation today with somebody else where last year, you got 28 fantasy points from a quarterback. You could ship tournaments. You need 40 from your quarterbacks now. This is a completely different era of fantasy that we're in right now.
Yeah, it's unreal how the season started. And in order to do that, you need to target the high-scoring games. This is the one we want to target here, this Falcons-Pittsburgh game. And Matt Ryan's a guy that I'm very interested in tournaments. He's doing a great job of spreading the ball around, trying to find the open man. Shouldn't have any difficulty doing that against Pittsburgh's soft secondary. Through the first 4 weeks, Pittsburgh ranks 3rd in most passing yardage allowed, 2nd in most passing touchdowns allowed. Their pressure rate of just 10.5% ranks bottom 12. It's allowing opposing wideouts to gain separation, make big plays. I'm not really going to overthink it. A Matt Ryan, Julio stack is going to be the foundation of my main tournament team this week.
And what I like about this game, this is like must win for both of these teams. Pittsburgh's at the bottom of their division at 1-2-1. The Falcons are 1-3. Scott, let's roll this back at quarterback. Why is Ben Roethlisberger worse? You don't have to convince me on this. This game is, I'm going to stack this game every which way using the lineup builder here on RotoGrinders.
Yeah, I actually think Atlanta's defense is probably worse than Pittsburgh at this point. They rank third worst in points allowed per drive. They rank second worst on this slate in schedule-adjusted fantasy points per game allowed to opposing quarterbacks. They rank fifth worst in pressures forced per dropback. And we all know the Ben Roethlisberger split since 2014, 23.5 fantasy points per game at home, 14.1 away. James Conner's under 20 rushing yards in 2 of his last 3 games. It's going to be a pass-heavy affair. And efficiency should be good for Roethlisberger in this contest.
Yeah, there's so many points Atlanta's hemorrhaging over the past couple of weeks, too. It's over 100 over the past 3 weeks combined. It was like 37, 34, and 24 since that defense has crumbled. Absolutely love this game. Everybody's going to be stacking it. Do you think both like these guys are going to come in so high owned, especially with stacks? Everyone's going to be piling in, but that is not going to scare me off this week. I'm going to be with the field, if not more, by the time it's all said and done. Absolutely love this game this week. Let's talk about a couple of value quarterbacks, and I think you've got the chalk quarterback. I haven't looked at our projected ownership yet, Tyler, so I will let you know that. But Blake Bortles, there's all these things working in Blake Bortles' favor. You've got the without Leonard Fournette splits. You've got a game where they're going to have to likely score. When Bortles flopped a couple weeks ago against Tennessee, I think the Tennessee defense was a little underrated at that time. And we know the Kansas City defense is going to be bad all season long here. I'm in agreement. I think Bortles is probably going to be the chalk quarterback of the week for most people.
Yeah, definitely at that price tag on DraftKings. He's a guy that I was immediately gravitated towards. I really like this game here between him and the Mahomes-led Chiefs. In 2 of his last 3 games, Bortles has thrown for over 300-plus yards. He's had fantasy outings of 28.3 and 36.5 DK points. Not just a floor you're getting here with Bortles. You're also getting a pretty high ceiling. The Chiefs' combination of high pace and a leaky secondary also make this a game where Bortles could be throwing a ton. Like you said, Fournette's out. They've done a fantastic job in those splits. As far as the passing game goes with Fournette out of the game. Kansas City has allowed the second most air yards and the most yards after catch to opposing offenses. So that means Bortles can hit guys deep and hit guys underneath and let them pile up yardage on their own. The Chiefs have allowed over 30 FanDuel points on average to opposing quarterbacks not named Case Keenum. It's been almost every game the Chiefs have allowed opposing QBs to go off. And I think Bortles is a great cash play.
I forgot where I heard this earlier in the week, and I forgot where it was. So this isn't my stat. But in Blake Bortles' last 10 games he's played, he's not just a quarterback one, he's the quarterback one over his last 10 games that he's played. Now, there's a lot of stuff like Patrick Mahomes didn't exist last year. Aaron Rodgers was hurt. But that is, I heard that from, it was somebody credible. Otherwise, I wouldn't repeat it. But just an amazing stat on Bortles, and everything's lined up for him to have a huge game. I think he's going to be pretty chalky, especially in cash games this week on DraftKings. Scott, so you're going a little contrarian here. Now, what's your thoughts on Bortles? Do you like Bortles, or did you get to the sheet late and you couldn't write him in there?
Yeah, he was my top guy for sure.
All right, so you got a couple swerves off of that, and I like where you're going in tournaments. When could we ever play Russell Wilson at 5,100? Is this a misprint on DraftKings and what should be like a game where he's going to be chucking the ball around the yard from the start here, because they're not going to try to run it against Los Angeles, right? Is Pete Carroll really going to try to run the ball like he wants to over and over again? I don't think so. You like Carson Wentz too. The Minnesota defense, I think, is probably a little overrated. They're going into Philadelphia on the road. I think Wentz can put up a lot of points. I think these are 2 really good swerves for you.
Yeah, so he's super cheap on DraftKings, Russell Wilson, that is, $1,800 less than his average salary last year. He struggled with efficiency with Doug Baldwin out. Doug Baldwin's back. Low rushing volume, low pass volume. But, he's had 2 victories and then 2 losses, and the 2 losses were both 1-score games. This is a game where without Earl Thomas up against what's easily, I think, the best offense in the NFL, they're practically screwed. So, I know they want to run, but I don't see that happening after the Rams put up like 21 points in the first quarter. And the Rams defense, honestly, like if everyone's healthy, I think is top 5 borderline, but, with Aqib Talib out, Marcus Peters hobbled, a defensive line that could only get interior pressure, which should mean, more room to run for Russell Wilson. I actually like this matchup quite a bit. Then on the other, my other value play quarterback, Carson Wentz is super cheap. I really like him, and I really like Kirk Cousins. I think, that's a sneaky shootout. Alshon's back for Carson. So among all teams on this slate, the Vikings rank worst. Philly ranks 4th worst in schedule-adjusted fantasy points per game allowed to quarterbacks. They're both glaring pass funnels. 81% of Philadelphia's yardage allowed has been via the pass. It's most. 73% for Minnesota. That's 9th most. Minnesota ranks 4th worst in opposing passer rating. No Everson Griffin. This pass defense is not anywhere near what it was last year, and pace is high, as you'll see when we talk about Pat Thorman's article.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. This slipped through my cracks last week when I was making my Thursday lineups. I can believe Kirk Cousins was only 5,300. I completely glossed over that. I had Thielen, and I think I had Robert Woods in there because they were all cheap. It looks like the DraftKings algorithm, if you're going up against the Rams, you're getting too much of a price. The guys get decreased way too much against them right now. So, Russell, I'm going to have some Russell Wilson. That is an amazing price on him. I like that call quite a bit. A couple of duds here. Ryan Tannehill. This dude doesn't exist to me. Dak Prescott doesn't exist to me. I don't want to. There's just some guys. I don't care. The low-owned quarterbacks have been coming through. We saw Mitch Trubisky, and we saw Derek Carr last week. We had Patrick Mahomes. I think that was in week 2. In week 1, we had Ryan Fitzpatrick at no ownership go off. But, Tyler, I don't care. This is a fade for me. No Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, I agree. I'll keep it pretty short here. The mirage of the 3-0 Dolphins came crashing back to earth last week against the Patriots. The Bengals get back Vontaze Burfict. The squad matches up really well against Dolphins and their vertical wide receivers. They limit big pass plays. And there's also a really big issue here with pace. The Dolphins run the 2nd fewest plays per game and run at the league's slowest seconds per snap. Shout out to Pat Thorman for that stat. There's just very little overall volume here for Tannehill, and it's a game that I don't think you really need to try to force in.
Yeah, hard pass. And Scott, I want to message you, or not message you, ask you this question. Stafford's 5,700. What are your thoughts on him? He's another quarterback. There's a lot of viable tournament quarterbacks. That game could have shootout written all over it as well.
Yeah, I like Stafford. He's not one of my top guys. Outside of Roethlisberger, Ryan, Russ, Wentz, Cousins. There's also and Bortles. There's also Jared Goff, Cam Newton. I like quite a bit. I think Derek Carr and Rivers are kind of in play. Yep. Even Josh Rosen as a super cheap option. I actually hate this week. It's kind of like a mass multi-entry sort of week for me because there's few glaring top plays, and like a lot of the guys I like, there's like 5 guys right around them in my projections.
Mm-hmm. If you need help optimizing our lineup builder here at RotoGrinders, Scott, let me help the guys build it. We got all kinds of cool stuff on it here for you. So real quick, your dud of the week at quarterback before we get to your opportunity next. Your popular name. You don't want to roster this guy this week, but if you're playing season long, go pick him up because the schedule turns in really nice for one Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, that's my boy, Baker Mayfield. It's just the matchup looks really tough. The Ravens rank 1st in fantasy points allowed per dropback, 1st in opposing passer rating. They're getting pressure to the quarterback at an alarming rate. So he's just a fade for me this week. But I'll happily play him next time he's in a good matchup.
Oh, that is like the next 5 or 6 weeks in a row he's going to be after this week. So go get him in your season-long teams. All right, Scott, I'll give you a minute here to talk about your actual opportunity. I've got it pulled up as big as I can make it on my screen for everybody here. Talk about what this is, and then give me a couple key standouts, some info we can take away for this week.
Yeah, actual opportunity is my metric for measuring usage. It's based on an 11-season sample of play-by-play data. We're calculating expected fantasy points to determine how valuable a player's role is by what the average player would have scored with a literally identical workload. So same carries from the same spot on the field at the same down and distance, the same targets with the same air yards, the same distance from the end zone. And so if you look at that, you'll notice that Alvin Kamara has easily the best usage of any player in fantasy. So it happens when you get high double-digit carry totals per game and double-digit targets per game, and you lead the league in opportunities inside the 10-yard line. You'll notice Kiki Kuti was someone who stood out as having fantastic volume in week one. It's just a one-game sample, though. Otherwise, Adam Thielen right now is dominating all wide receivers in terms of volume, followed by Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster, Saquon Barkley, great volume, Christian McCaffrey, great volume also on a market share basis. So last week, actually, my number one positive regression candidate was Corey Davis, and man, did that regression hit. So you'll have to stay tuned to hear who my two top regression candidates are this week.
All right, so we'll get to that in a minute, but Scott puts a lot of time into this. You can get this with the Edge subscription at Pro Football Focus and the fantasy articles along with everything else over there. Let's move it along into running backs. I don't know if there's as many running backs as I want to play, but the top tier looks pretty good, Tyler. And you're starting off with a guy. I made my chalk cash team before the show here. Melvin Gordon was in it. It's just so hard when he gets all the receptions near the goal line. He gets all the rushes. He's so involved. And Austin Eckler, while he's playing, isn't eating into any of his work share. And then you have the nuts matchup here against Oakland. How do you not play Melvin Gordon this week?
Yeah, honestly, the question is, how do you not play both Gurley and Gordon? I'm going to try to fit them both in. I currently have them in my FanDuel lineup, and I think they're both very strong cash plays.
DraftKings is a little tougher.
Yeah, DraftKings is a little tough. I'll give you that. But the thing is, Gordon is just a fantastic play this week against the Raiders. He's averaging 22 opportunities per game. That's carries and targets. He's top 12 in Scott's actual opportunity report, leads the league in targets inside the 10-yard line, and has scored at least 30 DraftKings points in 3 of 4 games. The Raiders have our third worst run defensive grade and have allowed the third most rushing yards, 6th most fantasy points opposing backs. There's reason after reason just to go for Gordon. They're implied for the second highest score of the main slate, 29.25 points. If the Chargers hope to hit that score, they're going to rely on Gordon quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's just these high-touch, high-volume running backs. You can use them in any format. It doesn't matter. They're the safest form of fantasy points while also having some of the highest ceilings to let you win. So even if he's going to be highly owned, you don't have to fade these guys necessarily in tournaments. Absolutely love Melvin Gordon. Scott, you've got Todd Gurley. Now, Gurley is, 800 more? You got to expect him to have a big game. The Rams can I think Melvin Gordon's touchdown work is a little bit safer than Gurley because just the Rams can score with any player on the field at any point in time, given how good their offense is, how good their head coach is, how good the offense has looked here. So I'm going to take the cost savings with Gordon, but I do like Gurley quite a bit.
Okay, that's true, but also the Rams are probably going to score more points.
50 points.
And Gurley is their favorite end zone option. So he averages 32.5 fantasy points per game in his last 7. He's scored at least 20 in each of his last 8. He dropped 45 the last time he faced Seattle. Earl Thomas is out. We all know the various splits with him in and out of the lineup. So Gurley's played in 7 games over the past 2 seasons where the Rams have won by 20 or more points. That's astounding. In those games, he still averages 79% of the team snaps, 18.3 carries per game, 5.0 targets per game, and 27.3 fantasy points per game. He's immune to blowouts, with Alvin Kamara off the main slate. And with Mark Ingram back, he's the safest option this week, and he probably has the highest floor, the highest ceiling too. So, I agree with Tyler. I don't know if it's possible, but I'm trying to jam him and Melvin Ingram in all of my lineups.
What I like too is Gurley. Before last week, they've been blowing everybody out, and I kind of do expect them to blow them out, but they do have to go to Seattle on here. Last week, in the back-and-forth high-scoring game, I believe he played almost every snap. Nobody else really saw the field or got any opportunity at all. It was all Todd Gurley if the game stays close. So if the game script didn't go completely in the Rams' favor, Gurley's going to be in there for every single play, and nobody's going to be stealing snaps at all. All right, Tyler. Let's talk about, I think the Cardinals, they figured out how to use their new toy. It only took 4 weeks, who would have thought, to get one of the most explosive playmakers in all of football, giving him more touches, more opportunities than he had all season. This happened last week for David Johnson. Has a pretty cupcake matchup here going into San Francisco this week. And that price is never going to be this low again.
Yeah, we had mentioned this before the show. I don't think we'll ever see another sub-7K David Johnson this year on DraftKings. We saw that the introduction of Josh Rosen meant a heavy dosage of DJ for the first time. He had 21 carries, catching 3 of 4 targets, gained 100 yards from scrimmage for the first time this season, and reached the end zone. This week, great matchup here against the 49ers, who have gotten burned by receiving backs. As much as we like to target pass-catching backs against Atlanta's defense, we'll soon need to start doing the same thing against San Francisco. They've given up the 3rd most receiving fantasy points to opposing backs. This game looks gross from a pace lens, but the one bright spot is going to be DJ, who has seen his snaps climb every week, season high of almost 92% last week, and has multiple touchdowns well within his range of outcomes here.
Dave Johnson's probably going to be on my cash team this week for sure, and I'll be sprinkling in a lot of tournaments. Scott, I want to ask you, so Tyler talked about Melvin Gordon, $600 less is your boy Darius Sanders, Christian McCaffrey. Which between one of those two, which ones you got this week?
Between Darius Sanders and who?
Melvin Gordon.
I'd gotta go with Gordon, but it is close.
Yeah. Oh, couldn't even stay on brand there. You got to stay on brand, man.
I know.
Christian McCaffrey. All right, let's talk a couple of your value running backs. You kind of got like this tier right here, right? We've got TJ Yeldon, who I think is going to be pretty chalky, should be heavily involved in the passing game. And as tough as it is to roster TJ Yeldon, it's really hard to see him fail, I think, in this game, unless Corey Grant just kind of takes over, something weird happens. You've got a couple other names here as well. So let's spread it around the chalk and then some less obvious options for people.
Yeah, so Yeldon actually burned me in week 2 when I talked about him on this podcast, but that was before we realized he was hurt. I think that news came out on like Saturday, and it affected his workload. He had a 50-50 perfectly even split with Corey Grant, but that wasn't the case in any of the other 3 games. So if we exclude that week, his usage it's been great, averaging 14.6 fantasy points per game, expected fantasy points per game, despite Fournette playing 4 quarters over that stretch. And if you exclude week 2, it's 15.7, and the split is 82% to 18% in Yeldon's favor. Again, that's actual opportunity, expected fantasy points. And just the Chiefs ranked 3rd worst in yards per carry. They're giving up the most total fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, the 5th most rushing, and the most receiving. We know Yeldon's a better receiver. It's just a smash matchup. And then the less obvious names, Matt Breida against Arizona. He was hurt heading into last week, and he got hurt during the game, and that played a role in his snap count. If he's all systems go, he's full health, then he's a guy I want to play. Arizona's giving up the 2nd most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Atrocious on the ground. And then Aaron Jones, I guess, is like a more of a tournament option. But every Green Bay pass catcher didn't practice today. Like that's big. And why not go run heavy in this contest when your quarterback is banged up? And the Lions rank last in yards per carry, 2nd worst in rushing fantasy points per game. And Aaron Jones is awesome. He's been awesome since last year. He's smashing. He's averaging like 6.5 yards per carry when every other running back of the team is averaging 2.6. Leads the league in a landslide by missed tackles forced per carry when Jamal Williams is dead last by a landslide. The usage makes no sense. But it is a concern. But
Mike McCarthy, bro.
I know. But if rational coaching, then he's a lock button play, but you can't make that assumption.
We've almost got all of the bad coaches out of the league. I don't know if McCarthy's a bad coach, but I think he's held Aaron Rodgers back. Yeah,
Imagine if Aaron Rodgers had
Sean McVay as his coach.
Oh my God,
that'd be insane.
Andy Reid, Belichick.
Oh my goodness. All right, let's get a couple of duds in here at the running back position. Tyler, Carlos, we didn't like Baker Mayfield. I feel like you're taking. We took the easy way out with Baker Mayfield. Scott did, and you're taking the easy way out here at running back with Carlos Hyde. You just don't take players against the Ravens right now.
Yeah, I think we're bearing the lead that the plays the Baltimore Ravens on DST.
Yes.
Carlos Hyde, though, an easy fade for me. He has a current 6-game streak of at least 50 yards and a touchdown. I think that streak ends here against Baltimore. They've allowed just 6 plays from inside the 5 so far this year, rarely allowing backs to get in that close to the goal line and get those cheap scores. The front 7 of Baltimore is perhaps one of the most unheralded units, but the secondary is getting back Jimmy Smith, and I think this whole defense is an ascending group. They're top 5 in fewest rushing yards allowed, and they've given up just 1 rushing touchdown to opposing backs on the year.
And Scott, you got Dalvin Cook. Can't play this dude until he's fully healthy. The hamstring issues, we've seen this. Leonard Fournette, it's bothering him. Cook's trying to play through it. It's not really working out for him. This is probably why you like Kirk Cousins. because you can't run on Philadelphia, and you're certainly not going to be able to do it with Latavius Murray banging into the line. Kirk Cousins is going to chuck this ball 50 times. I think that's probably why you like this week.
That's right. You nailed it.
I took it all from you.
There you go.
All right. Let's go to the PFF green line here. So, Devin, cue up the screen share. And I've seen, Scott, I'll stick with you on this since I took all the words out of your mouth.
The Mazda lineup of SUVs will provide safety, performance, and capability on your journey ahead. From the 3-row Mazda CX-9 to the first ever Mazda CX-50, our sales team is ready to guide you to the SUV for your lifestyle. Shop the Omaha Metro's exclusive Mazda dealers at Woodhouse Mazda in Bellevue or Woodhouse Place Mazda. Visit us online for your next Mazda SUV at woodhousemazda.com.
Delvin Cook. The biggest advantage that Greenline has given a single play this year is currently the over in the Thursday night game. The market is currently at 41, and the green line has it sitting at 59, which is just the biggest discrepancy I have seen all season.
The market has it at 51, right? You said
yes,
41.
So it's 8 points over. So go if you like the green line product, go jam the over right now on this one. What are your thoughts on this Thursday night game? I like DraftKings. They have the showdown. I don't play the showdown, but they have there's a big enough contest on the Thursday through Monday slate. Like you can win $10,000, $20,000 in some of the tournaments. I play those. I play cash games. What do you see happening in this Thursday night game?
Yeah, I don't know. I remember last week saying, I don't know about Greenline's call on the Patriots smashing to such a huge extent, and then that's exactly what happened. So I'm slowly learning not to fight it. But yeah, if you scroll down to the impact player injuries, you'll see
littered.
Or Harrison, Wilson out or questionable. Hilton not playing. Arguably that hurts the over under, but then the other side you'll see Eric Rowe, who's bad, also hurt, questionable. Edelman comes back. I'm not sure. It's just two really not great defenses, two pretty good offenses. So who knows? Maybe this could be a sloppy slugfest.
I don't know. This over. Tyler, what's your thoughts on this game? I kind of like the over. In DFS, a lot of these guys are kind of priced appropriately, so I'm not specifically targeting them like I was maybe a Woods and Thielen, and a lot of people that game were underpriced last week on DraftKings. They're all kind of priced appropriately. What do you see happening here?
Well, I just opened a new tab to my bookie and started hammering the over. But I am with you here on this game. I think there's a lot of fantasy goodness to be had. I'm definitely entering some showdown slates with Patriots stacks and bringing it back with some Naheem Hines and some Eric Ebron. I think there's going to be a lot of fantasy points scored in this one.
Yeah, I tend to agree on that one. So I like to do the Greenland product that comes with the premium package here on Pro Football Focus, where you get some of the premium stats. And I guess I'll stay with you. Actually, I'll go back to Scott on this. I don't know if Scott was here at the beginning of the show when I went over this, but we haven't looked at the premium stats too much here, Scott. So I went over this with Tyler. And this page right here, where it just lists the overall team grades for every major statistic, this is such a time saver for me in terms of doing some of my own research on what to start, and then you can copy paste it or download it as a CSV and color code it yourself if you want here. The premium, the highly advanced premium stats package at Pro Football Focus this year has really improved, and I use this. I use Football Outsiders, and I use Sharp Football. That's basically all I use for all of my analysis anymore. I don't even have to go to like 20 different websites anymore. Scott?
Yeah, sorry. You lost me. What was that?
The premium stats here, Pro Football Focus. Where
right.
Like the page, can you see the page I'm on here?
No, I can't. I'm sorry.
You can't? All right, Tyler, can you see the page I'm on here?
Yeah.
All right, so Tyler, tell me what's going on here.
All right, so it's basically a simplified version of color coding the best and worst matchups here. What I like to do is just sort like either by run defense or by pass rush or coverage.
Whatever you're looking for the week.
Yeah, and try to find teams to avoid or teams to target. So here on run defense, all the way at the bottom, the Raiders are the third worst, which makes Melvin Gordon a smash play. And then you can also do the same thing with pass rush and coverage grades to try to find teams that you want to target.
What are we doing with Alvin Kamara on the Thursday through Monday slate? I see the Redskins at the bottom. Oh my goodness, how are we doing that with Mark Ingram? But anyway, I have this page up pretty much all week long for all my research. It's a great tool. It is part of the more expensive product. There's some stuff in here you can get lost in this stuff. But it's a really great tool at PFF. And then Tyler, the snaps and pace. What'd you pick out here from Pat Thorman? We reference this every week. I read Ben Gretch's article here. He works for Fantasy Insiders, part of RotoGrinders. I read Evan Silva's article, and I read the snaps and pace article, and I do my own stuff. But other than that, those are pretty much the main articles I read.
Yeah, this is definitely one that I start my research on, just trying to find out where we can get the most plays and the most potential for fantasy points. Of course, the number one option here, the Falcons at Pittsburgh Steelers, highest scoring game on the slate for a reason. There's also going to be a lot of plays that are
no huddle at home for the Steelers.
Yes, a very important statistic there that Pat Thorman, the author, uncovered. Another game that I found very interesting that I wasn't initially on, which is one that Scott had talked about, was the Vikings-Eagles game. Really like this game because considering both are going to be pass funnel defenses, the secondary of the Eagles had just allowed a ton of yardage to Marcus Mariota last week. The Vikings just got torn up by Jared Goff last week. I think this is a great game that could go under the radar as far as stacking.
Yeah, I like this one. Are we concerned? I see the Cardinals down here at the bottom. I think this, after Rosen gets comfortable, it's against San Francisco. I think the Cardinals can kind of up their snaps a little bit this week. Does that concern you at all for David Johnson?
Oh, it's definitely a concern. Being the lowest in plays per game is definitely something we should be worried about. That's why I'm a little bit more apt to use David Johnson in tournaments, just chasing that multi-touchdown ceiling.
All right. So that'll wrap it up for some of the PFF stuff. Just a great site, lots of information. If you just like to read about some football stuff too, they have great articles day in, day out about anything you want to get your hands on for football. So let's get to some wide receivers. Tyler, you've talked too much, so I'm going to go back to Scott. And Scott, what are you telling me here? I don't understand what you have here on the sheet here. So who's your studs at wide receiver?
I just said MME. Yeah, it's a multi-entry week. So I'll just go back to my actual opportunity article. Mm-hmm. So the wide receivers with the best volume: Adam Thielen, then Antonio Brown, then Juju Smith-Schuster. Absolutely love all of them. Then Hopkins, who's off the main slate. Then Julio, who's my number one, but Tyler stole him. Then Landry, who I absolutely love, my top positive regression candidate by actual opportunity, like Corey Davis was last week. He's hurt, but good matchup. Then a few spots below him is Stephon Diggs, and I love really all these guys. Atlanta ranks dead last in schedule-adjusted fantasy points per game to wide receivers. It's good news for Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster. A lot of relevant slot matchups this week. The Jets, Vikings, Ravens, Falcons all rank bottom 4 fantasy points per game allowed to slot wide receivers. That's good news for, in order, Emmanuel Sanders, Nelson Aguilar, Jarvis Landry, and Juju Smith-Schuster. The Eagles have given up the 3rd most fantasy points per game to right wide receivers. That's where Stephon Diggs runs the majority of his routes. Pittsburgh's given up the 2nd most fantasy points per game to left wide receivers. That's where Julio Jones runs the majority of his routes. So a lot of high-end wide receivers to like. Which one's my favorite? Don't really have one. Sorry.
Yeah, just not Keenan Allen, not Odell Beckham Jr. You could probably play.
I mean, they're due.
Can you? My real question is: has the Steelers allowed a touchdown to a left wide receiver? This is the most important thing. Is Julio Jones going to score a touchdown? Isn't crazy? He's doing so good, and he doesn't have a touchdown. Odell Beckham is another guy that's doing reasonably well without a touchdown. If they ever catch the touchdowns, these could be the nuclear weeks for these guys. So just pay attention to that. Tyler, let's talk about Julio Jones this week.
Yeah, it's a perfect segue. Touchdowns are for the birds. Fortunately for Julio, he is a bird, and this is the week he not only reaches the end zone, but does it twice.
I don't know. It never happens.
All right, everyone gets their one Julio card once a year where they think he erupts. Luckily, I've got mine laminated, and I play it every single week. Julio is always in my tournament lineups, and I'm relentlessly chasing this immediate touchdown regression that is bound to happen. Pittsburgh's allowing the 2nd most receiving yards, 3rd most fantasy points opposing wideouts. Now they're facing the league leader in receiving yards and air yards. As we just mentioned earlier, this game is laden in pace and volume, should feature a ton of plays. touchdown regression's coming, and I'm not missing out on it.
Yeah, I think Julio is there's no one that's really going to say Julio's a bad play this week. I think he, if you got to predict a touchdown, seems like as good a week as any for Julio to get into the end zone. Let's talk a couple of value wide receivers. Scott, I'll start with you. Now, last week, the 4 to 5K range had, 8 or 9 playable guys, and they seemed to all hit last week. Now, this week, it's not as many, but I think there are some very good plays. You've got Taywan Taylor in here. I like him. I think Marvin Jones is 4,700 this week, which seems like a real one of the biggest mispricings on the week. I know it's always tough there with 3 wide receivers, but they all get their volume, and he is the end zone guy without question there right now. There's a couple other, but I'll let you talk about Taiwan, who I do like quite a bit this week.
Yeah, so Marvin Jones is probably the right answer, but props to Tyler. Beat me to it.
Yep.
Corey Davis is going to be shadowed by Tre'Davious White, who ranks 11th best of 105 qualifying cornerbacks and fantasy points per route in coverage over the past 2 seasons. He's our number 18 highest graded cornerback. That should open up more targets for their now number 2 option in the receiving game, with Delaney Walker out, with Rashard Matthews, who knows where. And Taylor saw really good volume last week. He totaled 17.4 expected fantasy points per game. That was 19th most of the position last week. He definitely benefited from game script and overtime shootout. So volume's not going to be that good every week, but it should be that good this week. Buffalo's giving up the 8th most fantasy points per game to slot wide receivers.
Yeah, I can definitely see Taiwan.
Taiwan Taylor.
Taiwan. All right. I don't know. Whatever.
I don't know. Taiwan's a country. But he's 500 off minimum price on FanDuel, and he's a 1K off minimum price on DraftKings. So he is super cheap.
Yeah. Tyler, let's talk Marvin Jones. I also want to throw in a couple other guys. Let me scroll in here. So we've got Sanu, I think, is 4,000. I don't like rostering Sanu, but if you want a piece of this game, I think that allows you to get it cheap here. He's probably the other guy in this price tier. Dede Westbrook is another one after his big game, although I think it's a little hard to trust which receiver is going to be the one that catches a touchdown or has a big game for Jacksonville. All I know is probably one of them will. What do you like here with Marvin Jones?
He was the first name that immediately stood out to me in terms of value this week. Apparently, I'm not the only one, though. I think by the time Sunday hits,
he'd be very popular.
Yeah, I think he could reach double-digit ownership. Which is understandable. He's the cheapest guy of this entire Detroit trio. The targets really only go to those 3 guys. But Marv is the guy with the highest ceiling, in my opinion. He's tied for the league lead in end zone targets with 9. He's top 10 in air yards. He's historically crushed the Packers, who are once again battling injuries in their secondary. And with a 51-point game total, there figures to be quite a bit of scoring here.
Yeah, I love Marvin Jones was on my shell team I made before the show here. What's your thoughts on guys like Dede Westbrook, Mohamed Sanu? You can mix in a couple other guys. The low 5K tier, there's a couple other guys. Anunwa, I think, is okay. You've got Sterling Shepard's up to 5,600, John Brown's 5,600, Demaryius Thomas, Tyler Boyd. So we don't have the 4 to 5K range as strong, but the 4 to 6K range, I think, is really loaded on DraftKings this week.
Yeah, I agree with you. Sanu, I like if you're doing some Atlanta-Pittsburgh game stacks. Otherwise, I'm not really that interested. 100 yards he got last week, but that was like a rarity for Sanu. Dede Westbrook, I think, is a really good play. Leads league in yak from the slot. Faces a Kansas City secondary that's allowing the most yak, peanut butter, meat jelly. Christian Kirk and Tyler Lockett, I think those are 2 cheap options that I think should also see a good amount of targets. Like you said, there's a lot of guys under 5K that are pretty viable.
Yeah, very interesting. Scott, let's go to your dud. And I think this has to do with impossible touchdown rate of Mr. Calvin Ridley, who is on fire. So interesting. This isn't like Tyler telling us to fade Michael Thomas a couple of weeks ago, but this is something that could come back to haunt you here. So why are we hating on Calvin Ridley?
I just want to add that I didn't like any of the names that you mentioned. I think the only one I'd play of the 9 is Tyler Boyd. But yeah, Calvin Ridley is not like a straight fade. He's just, unsustainably efficient right now. He ranks 44th in expected fantasy points per game, 13th in actual. He's the wide receiver 15 on FanDuel, wide receiver 20 in pricing. He's definitely still in play, just really risky and due for some serious regression. I like a guy like Tyler Boyd, way better volume, similar productivity, which should go up with Tyler Eifert out. So he's my pivot there.
Boyd lines up too to have a big game with Howard on the outside with the EJ Green. I would agree. I would take Boyd over Ridley.
Good call. Yeah.
Tyler, what do you think on Ridley? Are you on board? It's impossible to score 1.5 touchdowns per game as a receiver.
No, they're all going to Julio this week.
Yep, that's what you want to say. You got Amari Cooper as your dud. What do you see here? Just it's a tough outside matchup. The Chargers aren't really, Joey Bosa leaves that team and they just completely fall apart because they can't get any pass rush. And Amari is, I don't know, he's entered. I mean, he's not Brandon Cooks to me, but it seems like he has these huge ceiling games. Not someone I eliminate from my GPP pool right now.
Yeah, I think he has the floor ceiling that are both scary, where he could go off or he could give you a 2 for 20. The matchup here is what worries me against Casey Hayward, who's done a great job shadowing him over their last 3 games they've played each other. Here are his, Amari Cooper's stat lines: 1 catch, 7 yards on 1 target, 1 for 11 on 4 targets, 1 for 28 on 3 targets.
Is Cooper like one of these cornerback matchup dependent, like we had with Des Bryant was, right? Is Cooper one of these guys too? I believe I've read something on him being one of them.
I think Scott would have a better answer on that one than I would.
What do you got on? Can you know that off the top of your head, Scott?
I know he's right behind Ridley as my second most unsustainably efficient player by actual opportunity data. I also want to say that his near end zone work is constantly being overstated. Red zone targets don't really matter if they're targets, at the 19-yard line. Your chances of scoring are just as low as from the 34-yard line. So if you look at like end zone targets and targets inside the 10, it's still pretty good, but it's nowhere near as good as like people hype him up to be. That's about it.
All right, let's move it on to tight end. And I never thought I'd see, especially after a huge game, Tyler, that Travis Kelce would be $6K on DraftKings. And you got to think it's a good funnel spot for him, right? I mean, the Jaguars have a really good defense, but I think they're really good on the outside. Maybe Kelce's able to take advantage of them. The $6K price tag, it is reachable. If you want to play him, you can do it this week. He's not really going to be $6K again, I think, all season. I want to know more about this matchup here.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. Avoid the shutdown corners on the perimeter, attack the middle of the field. It just makes so much sense to utilize Kelce this week. He had a slow start in week 1, but ever since then, he's become a primary target for Mahomes. He's seen double-digit targets in each of their last 3 games, averaged 25.4 DraftKings points during that time span. Ertz, who's also been on fire, has gone for 18.9, just for some perspective there. The Jaguars have done a good job of limiting stud tight ends early. They've already played Gronk. They've already played Evan Ingram. Both of them put up stinkers, but neither were commanding such a high target percentage of their team like Kelce was. So I think Kelce's a guy that, despite what looks like a tough matchup on paper, is a guy that I definitely think you could target at just 6K.
Yeah, I think he's interesting. I also like Scott's pick here. Scott, if I told it's tight end, state of tight end in NFL is absolutely horrible right now. If I told you there was a tight end who got double-digit targets in every week, you'd be jonesing to put him into your lineup stats this week. That's what we have with Ertz in this game. They're just going to be passing all game long in this. All the guys from Philadelphia in the backfield that catch passes are still hurt. It's all going to be funneled to the wide receivers and the tight ends. 6,500, he should be like a $7,000 player. Kelce should be a $7,000 player. These guys are actually pretty big values this week.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's because, DraftKings, I guess, is basing their salaries on production rather than volume. And his volume has been insane. He's my number 2 positive regression candidate right after Jarvis Landry. He had poor efficiency in the Nick Foles starts. He's gotten a little unlucky in the touchdown department, but he leads all tight ends by 3.6. He ranks 7th among all receivers in expected fantasy points per game. Yet he's priced like a high-end tight end rather than basically the mid to low end wide receiver 1. His usage suggests he's 3.0 targets per game, more than the next closest tight end. He ranks 4th among all receivers in targets per game. Even with Alshon back, volume's going to be great. Production's going to be good. I'll use this stat again. used it last week. Ertz averages 17.5 fantasy points per game across his last 17 healthy games with Carson Wentz under center. That easily would have led the position last year. Would have been, again, wide receiver 1 numbers. And Minnesota's given up 2 90-plus yard games to tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
Ertz is their best receiver. He's probably going to go nuclear because, this game, I think, is a high-scoring shootout.
Yeah, and with the state of tight end, just getting you can argue getting the high floor, high ceiling combo at tight end is one of the biggest positional advantages you can get right now. I don't normally pay up. I probably still won't because I like to get the Antonio Browns and the Melvin Gordons into my cash team specifically. But for tournaments, these guys are fair game, and at tight end or even in the flex, you're going to get them low ownership, and they both have plenty of upside. So I like these. I like the high-end wide receivers quite a bit this week. Tyler value. So we're scrounging around. We don't have Eric Ebron to bail us out on the main slate this week. He's only on the Thursday slate. So we're looking for tight ends in high-scoring games that are seeing their snaps go up, that run a lot of routes, and when they're on the field, they don't block at all. That would be Vance McDonald. He's 3,700. Atlantic has been good against tight ends this year. I looked at, what was that, the DVOA. Looks like they've been pretty tough. I'm throwing that aside. I think Vance McDonald's a pretty good play this week.
Yeah, he's 3,700 on DK, but he's only 4,600 on FanDuel, $100 more than the bare minimum.
Auto play. What's going on over there?
I don't know. I'm 100%
Look at
plus
that. Scott couldn't even control himself.
He's too excited for Vance. He's had at least 5 targets in 6 of his last 7 games, including the postseason, picking up at least 50 yards and/or a touchdown in 5 of those 7. He has the largest advantage per our tight end matchup chart. That's by a long shot. And he, like you said, he rarely stays in line to block, just 13%. Great way to get a piece of this week's highest scoring game, especially on FanDuel.
Yeah, Vance, going to make you dance this week. I mean, even 3,700 on DraftKings in the state of tight end, that's like about as good as you can get here. I don't hate anyone thoughts on Njoku as a value play? You've got Jared Cook in here. We'll get to him in a second. He's definitely probably too cheap. Njoku, Hooper, Uzoma, any of those guys do anything for you?
They're okay values on DraftKings. Nick Vannett too, as someone I'd mentioned. Mm-hmm. Vance on FanDuel is definitely my top value tight end, but Tyler beat me to it again. So Jared Cook ranks second at the position, expected fantasy points per game, second in targets per game, first in expected touchdowns per game. Granted, he's also had like one of the easiest schedules to start the year I've ever seen. But, that volume still makes him a top value on both FanDuel and DraftKings. Like, I don't care if he has the toughest matchup this week. If he's seeing the sort of volume he's averaged over the last 4 weeks, he's still easily one of the best values at the position.
Yeah, his start to the season is just tight end funnel after tight end funnel after tight end funnel after tight end funnel. Rams, Denver, Miami, Cleveland. I don't know if Amari Cooper's the dud. He's got to throw it to somebody. Cook's 4,800, probably a little bit too cheap given his recent performance. So I like that call quite a bit here. Tyler, you obviously did not like David Njoku because you put him in the dud column this week. Why are you hating on Njoku?
I just wanted to give a bit of a hot take here for a fade, but it's honestly one that I really believe in because Njoku has been pretty terrible to start the year. He's been tight end 24 in week 1, tight end 24 in week 2, tight end 27 in week 3, and tight end 13 in week 4. Yeah, he's
going up. He's making progress.
Maybe. But I don't think he's going to get much progress here against the Ravens. Again, this defense we don't want to play. They're allowing the 8th fewest DK points to opposing tight ends. They have yet to allow one to reach the end zone. Njoku draws the second toughest matchup per our tight end matchup chart. I'm probably just going to play a lot of Vance McDonald and fade Njoku entirely.
Yeah, Scott, give me 30 seconds on your dud.
Antonio Gates, he unfortunately passed away 2 years ago, so
don't play him. Don't play him in your DFS lineups. All right, we're going to get out of here on that. Guys, go check out all the stuff over at Pro Football Focus. They have their Edge subscription. I think it's $40. Get you access to Scott's actual opportunity articles, along with Pat Thorman's article that we covered here, and about 20 million other things every single week if you want to step your game up and get to the Premium Stats 2.0. Use all the sheets and just get lost in statistics and Excel sheets. If you want to be a advanced level DFS player, go check it out. So guys, That's going to do it for the Week 5 edition of the Pro Football Focus Show. Thanks to Tyler and Scott for joining me. I am Britt, and we out ya.
The Mazda lineup of SUVs will provide safety, performance, and capability on your journey ahead. From the 3-row Mazda CX-9 to the first ever Mazda CX-50, our sales team is ready to guide you to the SUV for your lifestyle. Shop the Omaha Metro's exclusive Mazda dealers at Woodhouse Mazda in Bellevue or Woodhouse Place Mazda. Visit us online for your next Mazda SUV at woodhousemazda.com.